So now I'll be introducing Johanna Bröse, who is a social researcher from University of Tübingen with a main focus on critical migration and flight research. And as many here, she has many hats. She is also a freelance journalist and the editor of criticallesen.de and an activist. And she will be talking about the Gegenöffentlichkeit, the counter-publicity, and the critical movements and journalism in Turkey. Excuse me, not only in Turkey, but she'll be also talking about the Turkish.
Hello everyone, thank you for, is it working? Yeah. Thank you for inviting me here. Yeah, so it's, as Pinar mentioned, I'm a social researcher, but also an activist and a journalist. So I always struggle to combine those three things, make my research or like educational work at the university in Tübingen more political and raise awareness there for different issues, but also try to be on the streets, talking to people, and also getting the things I learn about different different movements or different situations out into the public, not only in scientific papers, but also in leftist newspapers. So it's always, I try to combine those three things. I want to talk about, today I want to talk about like something I'm sure many of you know far better than me, because I am a German researcher. I'm not from Turkey, but I'm not no expert, and my position is different from many others because of my privilege of going there, but also coming back again and not having the fear of being arrested for years. But yeah, I see this, and still I'm trying to, I try to go to Turkey, talk with different people there, and show them that there are some people here that are really trying to get their voices heard in different ways, and also, so I can, I try to bring some of the information back here. So what I try to talk about is that the situation for politically active voices in Turkey depends heavily on three parts. So that's my thesis, that the politically engaged people at the streets, on the streets, in movements and platforms, also in like left or pro-Kurdish or whatever they call them, parties or political movements. Then it's the oppositional media, which is really important, as we heard, and also the critical voices in research and scientific, at universities or in other places, which are in fact influencing the education and like the scientific talks. And all of them, they are really, it needs them to, that they are able to work and to publish their results. So the first part I mentioned, it's the people itself. Many of you probably know that there are many powerful protests in Turkey, and they are not happening just like now or in the last years, but they have like a long history. I think we shouldn't forget that. I think the ways of expressing protest changed over the years, and one significant point can be the Gezi protests in 2013, where like they had very creative and very powerful ways to express their protest. But yeah, we can go way back from that with different demonstrations, strikes, and so on. But Gezi, I think my following speaker will talk a little more about that. It's like a point where people from different groups or political groups started to show solidarity with the other struggles of marginalized groups. So the feminist groups, they were in solidarity with the workers, the queer, with the Kurdish people, and so on. So there was like this awareness of there are different people being repressed by the state, and that they kind of need to pay attention to the other struggles as well. And we see that, for example, at the LGBTQ Pride March in Istanbul in 2013, where lots of the Gezi Park protesters also attended, and it was the biggest march until then, with over 100,000 people or something. And it's actually, the Pride March is happening again this weekend in Istanbul. So yeah, I don't know, maybe show some solidarity there. So the spirit of Gezi, like it's called in lots of articles and stuff, also led to like the emerge of the HDP, the Democratic Party of the People, and they grew stronger with like the combination of different political issues, and also regarding the Kurdish question in the western parts of Turkey. So it was finally that there was kind of a bigger platform, like a really, a multi-interest party or platform that was issued. And this, I would say, and that's not my thesis, but from a dear friend of mine, Alp Kasarioglu, it also led to a hegemonic crisis for the AKP. So it was a big step there, and it, I think I don't have to recall every detail of the history, what happened since 2013. You all know, like the double elections, 2015, and the success of the HDP in this time, then all the war on Kurdish cities and also on Kurdish people, and the curfews, and then the attempted coup in last year in July, and the OHAL, which kind of came after this and is still going on. So my point is that there were many different protests in different places, and right now, although they are still happening, although they are really under pressure right now, and as we probably all know, that they try to silence all the oppositional voices and have like different and really many different ways of doing it. And so I can make an example of the women's movement, which I had the chance to meet some of the feminist group or members of groups in the southern part of Turkey, in Hatay and in Antep, and also in the eastern parts in Diyarbakir and Van. And so when I met some of them last year in summer, I was there in August, and they were still functioning, although the OHAL, the state of emergency, was already implemented. And but they said, well, we can continue our struggle and we're strong. And when I visited some of them in March this year, they told me that especially in the eastern parts and the Kurdish parts, literally all women's structures were shut down by the government, and like the Congress of Free Women in the Kurdish region, Vanvakat, another big platform for women, and countless other smaller platforms and structures. And what they all had in common, they had really different ways to work, but they had in common that they make female voices heard, and they talk about violence, and they talk about patriarchy, and they talk about ways to empower themselves, and they identify the state and the government as the main source of repression. So it was not that they kind of just blamed the men or whatever. They had like a really powerful way to talk in smaller and informal networks, or also in bigger networks, about the state repression, and that made them dangerous and a threat for the state itself. And they said it themselves, that they are feared by the government, and because they, they said they could literally be 50% of the population in Turkey, and that makes like a bigger threat. So yeah. The second part which I mentioned is the media, which we heard a lot about from my neighbor here. I wanted to just highlight two other things. One is Jinha, or Zujin, which is the all-female news agency. In their main quarter was in Diyarbakir, but they are all over the Kurdish regions, or the eastern Turkey. And I met some of them last year, and yes, they have encountered really a lot of repression, and their offices were shut down, and I don't know, they don't even count anymore how many times the website was shut down, and so on. So they have very little resources and very little means of production, but they are still trying to publish. They are really creative in doing so. They do it they try to publish in Turkish, in Kurdish, and in English. So they are really trying to make their voices heard for like a larger audience as well. And so they are an example for how much also the free media is really literally under siege or under heavy fire. And so they also go into different parts of the Kurdish region to talk about the war crimes there and the destruction. So in March I met one of the Jinha journalists, or the Zujin journalists, which I met in the last summer. I met again in Gever in Yüksekova, which is really at the close border to Iran, Iraq. So she also told me that she just came back from reporting about military operations going on there. So they're really they're fearless, but they're really also in great danger. Some of them were shot. Some of them are in jail, like one of the editors, Seraduan. She was in jail for about a year, and then she came free a few weeks ago, and then she was put in jail right away again. So that's one of the things I learned about the female journalist there. And you see the absurdity of the blocking of media content as well when you look at the leftist newspaper Sendikork. It's a leftist and union-linked news site, and their domain gets shut down, and so they started every other news site has the same problem. But what they did, they kind of reserved every newspaper, every website name starting with Sendika, and then a number and org. So what they have now is their address is Sendika 48 org. So their blockage was at least 48 times now. So it shows, you can see like how much they are being blocked and shut down. And one last thing I wanted to talk about was the critical research in science, which is also a thing I'm really concerned about. I just read 2 days ago or something at the Turkey Purge news site that they said that the research output after the coup, like the research output in the last year, had a 28% decrease in the last year. So that's almost a third of the critical or the research academical research output in Turkey that is now like not existent anymore, and that I think we know that it's pretty sure almost all of like the critical research that is affected by that. So it's a huge decrease of quality, and really, it's a big loss for free and critical research as well. So maybe we can talk about this later, what this means for education and what this means for like critical talks about in universities and so on. Yeah, so okay, this would be probably all I have to say.